well. So I don't hold it fully against him, but I do think that there is a top-end level that they can play at that they have not shown yet, and they will need to find that in this matchup against the Mavericks.
If you can wager on it, we're talking about it right here on The Gambler.
My station, baby!
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Time to get ready for the day's action. From the sides to the totals and everything in between, nobody does it better than the Tough Cover with Mark Henry, right here on The Gambler.
Look in my eyes, what do you see? The cult of personality. I know your anger, I know your dreams. I've been anything you wanna be. Oh, I'm the cult of personality. I like Mussolini and Kennedy. I'm the cult of personality. The cult of personality. The cult of personality. Neon lights, Nobel Prize, when a mirror speaks, the reflection lies. You won't have to follow me. Only you can set me free.
Hello and welcome to the Tough Cover Radio Show. I am your host, as always, Mark Henry Jr. You can follow me on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. _. You can get involved with the conversation over at Fox PHL Gambler. This is streaming on my Twitter, Fox Sports The Gambler's Twitter, Fox Sports The Gambler on YouTube, as well as iHeartRadio. Back in the studio, we got my co-host, Sean Barnard. Sean, how we doing?
Doing well, Mark Henry Jr. I think you said a little low-energy show going in. I'm ready to bring it. I'm ready to get fired up. Let's fix this Sixers team during this show, man.
Yeah. No, I'm fired up. I have some rants to go on. I have a couple things I have planned, but didn't get my coffee in me today, folks.
Understood.
So, I'm getting what I can in caffeine-wise here. No coffee and Red Bull in the building. We got soda going on. Who knows? Someone shipped me a 5-hour energy or something. But I need it because I'm going to the Phillies game tonight, and that's what we're going to be talking about all games or all show today, obviously. Not all show, but a lot of Phillies talk. First team to 40 wins, best team in baseball still, even though, some fans, got upset with a couple random losses last weekend on the West Coast, but still the best team in baseball, still the first team, 240 wins. And there's so much to break down, so many guys to talk about. And I do want to just, welcome you folks and welcome Sean and Jeremy to Schwarberfest. It is June.
It's here.
The calendar, I was going to say the clock hit June. The calendar hit June, and here we are. This is Kyle Schwarber's, time of the year. This is when we see Kyle Schwarber turn into the best, home run hitter in Phillies history. So it would be so funny if he just does this again. I mean, it's been so many years in a row that he's done this. At some point, I feel like last year people were like, oh, is he really going to do it in June? I feel like everyone's just like, yeah, okay, like 10 home runs in the next 30 days or something, Kyle. Like, we expect it. It is funny. Like, I hope that he's able to kind of live up to the Schwarberfest moniker. By the way, that's Jeremy Horwath down below. You can follow him at jhorwath11. You can follow Sean Bernard at Sean_Bernard1 over on Twitter. And we're going to talk a lot about the Phillies, but especially the second hour of this show, we're going to be talking heavily about the Sixers offseason. I've been in a lot of conversations this week on Twitter and offline, just about different potential outcomes for the Sixers. I think I understand some cap hold things a little bit more, who we can sign over the cap, who we can't. I'll lead it off like this. I'm having a hard time being optimistic about this Sixers offseason, having a really, really hard time trying to picture what the full picture is. Not just, did we get Paul George? Did we not? Did we make a big trade? Did we not? On getting that done, because they have to get a big move done. And I think that they have a lot to do other than that, since they only have 2 players on the roster. So there's a lot to talk about when it comes to the Sixers offseason and building our ideal Sixers offseason, which we're going to do a lot of in the second hour. Obviously, Sean Barnard will lead the charge there. And I'll try to sell him on a certain forward that I've been, caping for quite hard over the last couple of weeks, which is something I never thought I'd do. So that's a little tease for the second hour. Obviously, also picks on the show. I've got some MLB picks today, a couple NHL picks. I've been red hot over the last couple. It's funny. I had like a 6-day stretch 2 weeks ago, or like a week and a half ago, leading into last week's show. Then I did good on last week's show. Then I was terrible for 3 or 4 days. Now, last 3 or 4 days, we're back on the horse, back on the wagon. We're red hot again. So a lot of picks on the card today. But let's start it off talking about the Phils. And I have a couple players that I want to get to and I want to highlight and I want to talk about. But obviously, there's nowhere else to start right now than Edmundo Sosa. I mean, this is one of the crazier things I've ever seen in not just Philadelphia sports, but sports in general. Like, this guy's just a journeyman bench player. We got him for a guy who we were going to cut a couple of years ago. Funny enough, people are talking about that trade with St. Louis. JoJo Ramirez actually turned into like a stud reliever for the Cardinals, funny enough. But obviously, Edmundo Sosa looks like we won the trade from our perspective, at least. In May, among all NL players with at least 80 plate appearances, by the way, this is from our guy Bob Wankel, he is first in slugging, first in F4, fourth in OPS, fourth in WOBA, fifth in WRC+, 11th in OBP. I mean, he was first in WAR before he hit a 2-run home run last night, just ahead of Shohei Ohtani and Bryce Harper. I mean, I don't even know what to say about it other than, someone's going to have to learn left field.
Yeah. Yeah, that does seem to be the outlook here. And the thing that I'll say about Sosa, like, I get it. He's a journeyman. I get it. Like, this, if you look over the larger sample size, seems like it will not be here to stay. But when you watch him, it feels like it is. Like, there is a swagger. There is a way that he carries himself. Even that home run last night, like the way that he just drops the bat and the way that he looks at it, there's a level of confidence that he's playing with that I don't think he's ever truly had before. And that is telling. And that is infectious to the team. And that is valuable when kind of projecting this forward. And with baseball specifically, we know what a long season, what a grind it is. It's very valuable to have these types of pieces that you can rotate it, give guys days off. And obviously, they're surviving the Trey Turner injury and not missing a beat because of the level that he's playing at. So this is a huge credit to Sosa for stepping up and taking the challenge. It's tough to take a guy out when he's playing this well. I simply don't think you can do it. So I'm kind of with you that if this is here to stay, you find a way to keep him around.
Jeremy?
Yeah, and the thing about Edmundo Sosa is we've called him like that journeyman where he's just been like on the bench. His first 2 seasons that he actually played baseball, he was caught up in September call-ups. He played 10 games in 2 years in his first 2 years. He then got to have an opportunity in St. Louis in 2019 or in 2021, and he actually played pretty well. He played 113 games, a 271 batting average. He played decent when he was able to get his time. So I'm kind of viewing him now as someone that he never got his right opportunity. And now that he has that little sliver of an opportunity, sadly it comes down to because Trey Turner gets injured. There sometimes things can work itself out and you find another great baseball player. Maybe this is truly who Edmundo Sosa is. I'm sure it won't be at, having a higher WAR than Shohei Ohtani and Bryce Harper for the rest of the season, but maybe he actually is just an actual good baseball player and that he makes his time worth it. And I hope that's what it's going to be because he's so much fun to watch. He's he's just been playing so well so far this year.
And for what it's worth, he's still 28 years old.
Yeah, he's only 28. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, this is the time where guys are in their prime. They're hitting it right around 28. And, maybe we're just finding that sweet spot. Those are the type of players that matter in seasons like the Phillies are having. They, like you think like the Braves got Jorge Soler to help win a World Series and Jock Peterson and stuff like that. These are the type of players that come up really big in times where you don't expect players like that to come up big. They're the ones that not lead teams, but are a very big help in a team winning a World Series. It can't just be Bryce Harper and JT Realmuto and Trey Turner. Like, there has to be other role players that play really well. And Edmundo Sosa can be that guy this year for the Phillies.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And there's so many guys that I kind of want to get to, But one guy, just a real quick one, and another Bob Wankel tweet that inspired a Luke Arcaney tweet. I tweeted, or Bob Wankel tweeted, Matt Strahm should absolutely be an all-star at the all-star break this year. And I tweeted, it's an absolute travesty if he's not at this point. The dude's got a .78 ERA. He's been the best reliever in baseball. I mean, there's no way around it. You look at since if you take his first outing out of the equation, it's a 0.00 ERA. Like it's now 23 straight scoreless appearances for Matt Strahm. This is like as impressive as what Brad Lidge was doing and no one's talking about it. But 23 straight scoreless. It's more impressive because Lidge gave up runs.
I was going to say more.
Yeah, because Lidge, what was it, 46 for 46 that Lidge went? Something like that.
Something crazy.
Take all those games. How many of those games did he give up runs in? Probably like 10 to 15 of them because he would load the bases. He would get your heart pumping before he would save the game. Strahm almost doesn't even do that. And he doesn't, let any runs up. So, and it's so weird because you watch him. Is he like the fifth, nastiest guy on the staff? Right. I don't watch him and I'm like, oh my God, he's so filthy.
He is the Ranger Suarez of the bullpen. Ranger Suarez stuff,
call.
When you see his stuff, it's not like, oh my gosh, he's going to be the best pitcher in the league. But he's so good. And that's the same thing with Matt Strahm. I think that's a good comparison. That's
a great call. That's a great call by Jeremy. I like that. But yeah, I mean, you watch Hoffman, you watch Kerkering, you watch you watch Alvarado, obviously. Even when Soto is on, the thing with Soto is he's so bad when he's not on. But when Soto's on, those guys are filthier than Strahm is. But Strahm's been the best reliever. Not to take anything away from Jeff Hoffman, by the way, who I thought his fastball last night looked more deadly than I've ever seen his fastball. Those guys didn't have a chance at it. They couldn't catch up. And then he would throw off speed. He looked as nasty last night as I think I've ever seen Jeff look. I don't think I've ever been as confident. These guys can't get close to touching this guy. And he just went 1, 2, 3, mowed him down. I think it was 2 strikeouts and a pop out. The bullpen has really, really at the top been incredible. I mean, you look at Strahm, you look at Hoffman. Alvarado, I actually think doesn't look quite as filthy to the eye. He's not hitting as 100 as often. I think the fastball looks a little flatter for Alvarado. It doesn't have the same movement that I'm used to over the last couple of years when he was, one of the best relievers in baseball. I almost think, I was talking about this to Terry Franconia, NBA Slime on Twitter this morning, about the benefit. He's one of those people who's doom and gloom. He's like, you win all these games in the MLB and it doesn't really matter because of the format. And I get some of the gripes there. And I really do. I mean, the Braves can tell you all about it. But I think what it does do, and he agreed with this, is it gives you the opportunity to not have to play balls to the wall July through September. You can give guys a week off. You can give them an IL stint if they need one. Bryce has how many things that he's dealing with right now? They said he tweaked his knee. He's got a back thing. Obviously, the arm is always going to be a concern. So he's got all these things that, he's still playing great, but you wouldn't mind getting him a week off, and you can kind of afford to do so. And you wouldn't mind getting Alvarado a week or two off, and you can kind of afford to do so. So that's kind of the biggest benefit of this hot start. But another guy that I wanted to talk about, I have two more big conversations on Phillies guys that I want to talk about.
Okay.
One guy I just think is not nearly getting enough recognition, credit, whatever you want to say. And I actually feel like he's getting a little bit of it nationally, but maybe not as much locally. But Christopher Sanchez has been unbelievable. I never would have thought he could be what he's been throughout this season, even through last year. He's given up 1 home run in 11 starts. I believe he gave up, 16 and 18 starts last year. I gave the stat out recently. That was his big bugaboo last year. He struggled with giving up the home run. He's totally cut that out of his game. And you can credit pitching coach Caleb Coughlin, who's just invented Christopher Sanchez out of thin air. It feels like our pitching coaching is unbelievable. Hopefully no one ever steals him. But Sanchez has a 2.83 ERA, a 2.4 FIP. He had a 3.4 ERA last year. His changeup is the best changeup in baseball. It's one of the best pitches in baseball in general, if you look at kind of the underlying advanced metrics on it. All of a sudden, he's hitting 97, 98 on the gun. His average fastball velocity is up 3 miles per hour from last year, where it was 92. Now it's at 95. Like, I'm just planting my flag. I'm in that this guy can be like a top 20, top 25 pitcher in Major League Baseball. And he's been so. He's been higher than that so far this year. But I'm planting my flag that he can be that going forward. And then I'm buying in on him as a part of this Phillies core. I think that raise in velocity, the cutting out what seemed to be his biggest problem last year with home runs, like that just gives me so much confidence because obviously there's building blocks there. He had a 3.4 ERA with those problems last year, with not throwing that hard and with, giving up too many walks and giving up too many homers. He's cut all that out. And I believe in it. I fully buy in on it. And my biggest point is, I remember a time where like the Wildwood Boardwalk was full of like Vanimal Vance Worley shirts. Like we used to go nuts for like these young stars or young studs, or Dominic Brown. We're like, this guy's next up. He's going to be the future. No one's even doing that at all with Christopher Sanchez. No one really cares. It's kind of just like, yeah, he's our fourth starter. And maybe that's just because we have so much star power on this team, so many young studs to latch onto. There's not enough oxygen for Christopher Sanchez, but he needs credit. Chrissy Sanchez is the man.
Yeah, and pitching talent's the other thing. Like, as great as we're fluffing him up, he's still probably been the fourth best pitcher on the Phillies, which is crazy to say. I guess you can probably make the argument, like, statistically, he's been better than Nola, but like Ranger.
That's the thing. It's right there now. Nola's been playing so well recently that he's right there again, which is so crazy.
But Ranger and Wheeler are guys that like are legitimately in the Cy Young race, which is crazy to say. And we obviously have a ton more baseball to play that we'll see with Ranger. And as much of a Ranger Suarez guy as I am, I would hesitate to be fully in on this lasting the entire season, although I would absolutely love it to be the case. But the bottom line is there's talent on every level of this pitching staff, which I can't remember feeling that way about a Phillies team in my recent memory. So it is great for that to be the case. We've had the conversation with Spencer Turnbull as well for that being another option and seeing how things shake out. So there's a lot of flexibility and options. Dombrowski, just hats off to the way that he has set up this roster, because it feels like they can go a million different directions for how they want to go the rest of this season. They can spread things out, add another pitcher, give some extra rest days. The fact that they got off to this good start does give them the flexibility where it doesn't have to be 100 miles per hour, foot on the gas from start to finish this year, or have those must-win games down the stretch, which we've seen them have to deal with for several years now. So they're in a great spot, this Phillies team, and I do think it is a ton of credit for Dombrowski for setting up the team the way that he has. And it's cool to see kind of the seeds that they've planted for some of these young guys, and even the Bryson Stotts of the world, the Alec Boehms. All these guys are growing exactly as planned. So hat tip to everyone. The coaching staff, also a huge credit. The Kevin Longs of the world, incredible stuff. So this team's awesome. They're fun to watch. And it's rare to feel like everything is going exactly as planned, but that's exactly where they're at right now.
You see, and what else I see about the pitching on this team is that it's, again, just like Mark was bringing up earlier, there might not be a bunch of guys that have like crazy stuff and that like what you'd see out of a pitcher. They focused on command and control so much that it's almost like shifting like how pitching is in baseball a little bit. Like you don't have to always find a guy that's going to throw 102 miles an hour or is going to have a slider that breaks more than anyone else like Kirkling has. It's just, there can be guys that can locate a ball and put it wherever they want. And the coaching staff has just done so well with guys that like Ranger, like Christopher Sanchez, like Matt Strom, like Spencer Turnbull, all of these other random guys. They've done so well with them and just teaching them and bringing them up that I think it's going to change the dynamic for Phillies baseball for the longest time.
Yeah. And I mean, look at the farm system. You have obviously Andrew Painter, who's injured right now, but he's, I believe, the number two pitcher prospect in baseball. You have Mick Abel. I don't want to put this out there too much, but I'm in on trading Mick Abel at the deadline. Kind of, I'll put that out there. He's not an untouchable for me, like Painter is. And I'm introducing someone to the untouchable conversation. I think this is the first time me and Jeremy have ever talked about him. Jeremy, how much do you know about this George Clausen character?
I don't know too much. I've seen some things about him, but yeah, I don't know too much.
I'm ready to buy a jersey. I'm all in. I'm all in on what I've seen Klassen, if you want to take a look later. Jeremy, George Klassen. I think it's 6 of 8 starts have been shutouts this year in the minors. He was a 6th round pick last year. The dude's, tall. He's got everything you want in terms of the tools, and he's been unreal to start. He's rising up the minor league prospect rankings for the Phils. So he's untouchable for me. I'm putting that stamp on him. And Aiden Miller's untouchable. Go trade McAble, trade Justin Crawford, keep Aiden Miller, George Klassen, and obviously Andrew Painter. That's my planting the flag on the Phillies prospects. I feel like Luke will be upset with the McAble and Justin Crawford takes. Justin Crawford's going to be like a slap hitter. I've been loud about that. I've got no interest in Justin Crawford. I want him to be
Carl Crawford. I said he's just going to be Carl Crawford.
No, if he's Carl Crawford, I'd take it.
Yeah, well, of course.
Yeah, there's
same
been
style of player.
He's hitting everything into the ground. Allegedly, he just can't lift the ball. So I just don't think that's gonna work. So we have Johan Rojas already. I don't need Justin Crawford. It just feels like there's so much overlap with what we already have with Rojas and Pesci to what Crawford could be. I'm kind of good on it.
Still a Rojas defender for the record.
Yeah, I'm I think I'm actually the funny thing is I think I might be the most objective Johan Rojas person in Philadelphia. I feel like I see the hate. Bob Wankel wants to send him down. I know for sure.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen plenty of it.
Bob wants to send him down to get him to work on some hitting stuff. And he thinks he'll be back up, but he's like, there's just too many guys hitting right now, like Clemens, and you can't cut unless they're willing to cut Witt, which I think they should, honestly. It's a 1-year deal.
It's cut bad.
Yeah. I'm good. I'm done with him. But he wants him to send Rojas down. We'll see. I don't think that's the right move. I probably would play him a little less than they have been. I do think, he should probably they probably should go get a guy who can hit lefties, to be quite honest. And that's not just for Rojas; it's for Marsh as well. And we're going to talk about Marsh when we get to my bets today. So I have some fun stats to point out when it comes to Brandon Marsh. But one last guy before we go to commercial. And I never thought I'd do this on this program. Never once would have thought that I would have come on here defending this Philly and caping for this Philly. I tweeted about it yesterday. Nick Castellanos.
Wow.
There's been a lot of hate for Nick Castellanos. John Jansen wants us to just cut him or, go get someone to replace him. There's a lot of hate out there for him. And I get it. No one has been more vocal about how much they hate watching Nick Castellanos play baseball than I have. I've been vocal about it. I hate his approach at the plate. But over the last 28 games, he has a 761 OPS, well above league average. He has 6 home runs in that stretch and 16 RBIs. That production through 162 games would put him on pace for 35 home runs and 93 RBIs. So basically as good or better of a year than he had last year when we were celebrating him. No one's acting like that or talking like that. And it's a 28 game sample size. I get it. And the reason that is the reason that the stats still look so crappy when you go and take a look is through 30 games, he had a 399 OPS. He was the worst player in baseball, quite honestly. He was hitting like 125 or 135, whatever it was. So he was the worst player in baseball in April. There's no dancing around that. But looking over the last 28 games, he's been better than I would even accept. Like if he was like a 720 OPS guy or a 700 OPS guy hitting 25 homers a year, I'd take it. It's fine. Whatever. You plug it in and you kind of forget about it. But if he's a 35 home run guy, and I know it's short sample size, people are just throwing in the towel way too much on Castellanos, acting like we need to replace him. He is not in any way going to be replaced. He will be an everyday player on this team for the rest of the year, going through the postseason. Now, if he goes through one of and this is where I come back on it and I say, if he goes through one of the crazy slumps we saw him go through in the NLCS, he should have sat game 6 and 7 or one of them or whatever. I get it. He's a hot and cold player where if he's playing that poorly, you need to yank him. You need to have an emergency plan. But in general, I think you have to plan for him being the starting outfielder. And I think he's been more than fine over the last month.
Yeah, I think those are great points there. The Castellanos experience has been something. I'd be lying if I still didn't feel like he's underwhelmed based on the expectations when he first came here. And I don't think that ultimately is going to change. I think that's probably the conclusion at the end of this as a whole. But you got to deal with who it is. That I don't see them moving off him, even speaking beyond this year when thinking about the money that he's tied to and all these types of things. The bottom line is you do have to take the good and the bad with him. That in Castellanos' defense there, I still think he's a guy that cares. I still think he's a guy that's trying. And I still think it's a guy that's working to get better, that you see him in the cage trying to figure things out. The plate approach is absolutely something that drives me crazy. And I'll speak to from my full critique of Castellanos as a whole has been much more about like this commitment to keeping him in the lineup the way that he has, that I think there should be more flexibility, particularly speaking really in last year's postseason that it rubbed me the wrong way. You got to be willing to move him down when the situation calls for it, or if he's not hitting up to par. That's more of my critique, and that's more of a Rob Thompson thing than a Castellanos specifically. But with Casty, I do think it's about like they got to get him thinking as little as possible up here. That I think he's very much like a reactionary, see ball, hit ball kind of guy. That feels like the best world for him up there. I think he's in his own head a little bit, trying to think off his plate approach and these other things that just get the dude relaxing and playing baseball. I think everyone will be at the better because of this, but he's absolutely on the upturn, and I do agree has been better than I think the perception of him is.
Yeah, he shouldn't have the most ABs on the Phils, which he does. He has the most at bats on the team, which that's frustrating, and I understand that. But and I totally agree, by the way, that when we look back on the contract, we're going to be like, yeah, we paid him too much for what the production was. Now you hope that there's a World Series ring in that contract, and then you don't care. You don't care what you paid anybody. Like John Middleton said, no one asks and this is such a dumb quote for an owner to say, by the way, but I love him, so I'll give him whatever. Like, no one asks what the salary or what the cap sheet was for the 1927 Yankees, right? That's the quote from I butchered it, but when you have the thing is,
Middleton's a real one as an owner.
He definitely is. But
but now he is, yes.
That's true. When you have as many steal contracts as the Phillies do, and you made as many steal trades, like getting Marsh on the cheap the way that they did, even Alvarado back in the day, getting him for cheap, signing Turnbull, finding Sanchez, like you can deal with the Walker and Castellanos contracts a little bit more. And you can just hope that they can be somewhat productive parts of the team. And I think Nick has done that for the most part. You look at the hot streaks he had last year. We wouldn't have beat the Braves without him last year. He's done that. He's had those moments, and he's had the streaks where he's at least stepped up and been productive. Taijuan Walker, on the other hand, that's a different conversation. So I'll save that one for a different time. But let's take a break. On the other side, we're going to come back with some baseball picks. I believe I've got 6, and then I've got 2 Hermo Strong picks and a couple NHL picks. So on the other side, back after this with picks on the Tough Cover Radio Show.
The biggest stars in the universe
are on a collision course.
Again, that's topdoglaw.com.
If you can wager on it, we're talking about it. It's The Gambler.
Welcome back to the Taco Radio Show. Felt like I had to wait for the first thunder at least.
Had to get one.
Yeah. And I wanted to throw this stat out there because I had my dad yelling at me because I called June Schwarber the best home run hitter of all time. That's the joke. If it was June all the time, and the stat that I wanted to find, Barry Bonds had 12,606 plate appearances. He had 762 home runs. This was on June 18th last year, so this changes. I'm sure it changed throughout the rest of the month, although I know he was incredible the whole month of June. June Schwarber at this point had 599 plate appearances and had 53 home runs. If June Schwarber got 12,606 career plate appearances, he would hit 1,115 home runs. That's the joke about how good June Kyle Schwarber has been, not just this year, but throughout his entire career. It's, in Chicago, in Washington, in Philadelphia.
Boston.
No, he wasn't in Boston in June. He was, that was when he had his historic Washington run in June, and they traded him for a ton in July, and he led the team in OPS the rest of the way, and they went to the ALCS in Boston. Kyle Schwarber,
good call, by the way.
Another guy who I feel like is almost going under the radar. Like, it's just like, Kyle Schwarber. Like,
Contact Kyle this year.
I know he still has 11 homers, so he's still on pace for probably like 35 plus homers. So he's still mashing a little bit. But I hope everyone's happy. Yeah, you got singles Kyle. You can't, we're not having 50 homers anymore. I hope everyone's happy.
I do have some concerns about the June Schwarber. I am a big believer in the Ryan Howard theory of when big men are meant to be big men, sometimes the power goes away when you're slimming down. I would like to see a little bit more of a barrel on Kyle Schwarber. I can't lie.
I can't believe that we're talking about this.
I hope the June powers weren't in his gut.
I can't believe we're in the year 2024 and we're saying Kyle Schwarber needs more pop in his bat.
More barrel on his gut is my comment here. Yeah. Back on the LBs. I don't need skinny boy Kyle Schwarber. I want Kyle Schwarber mashing, being a big boy, being who he is. So that's the Kyle Schwarber I know and love. That's what I want.
Oh man, that's great.
And we've got a night game tonight, and I think there's a good chance Kyle Schwarber leads June off with a home run tonight against Sonny Gray. I really do think that there's a good chance that he does it tonight. But
leadoff homer? A leadoff homer?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I think there's a good chance of it for sure. But let me run through my picks here. I've got 10 picks on the board. Do either you guys have any picks ready today?
I do not.
Okay, no problem. At 410, that's my fault as a host, by the way. That's something I should ask off air. That's not something on air, but we digress. 410, the Kansas City Royals plus 102. I'm going with the Royals. This is less of a bet on the Royals and a fade on Joe Musgrove, who has been absolutely terrible this year. 5.66 ERA. The Royals have had a lot of BBP success against them, and Alec Marsh has been solid. So give me the Royals, 1 unit play, nothing crazy. My next play, this is a full-on Joe Osborne pick, who I haven't had on this show, surprisingly. I'm going to eventually reach out to have him on. He's been a Twitter pal of mine. Good follow over there at Joe Osborne. But he's a big gambling guy. He's got Chris Sale over 18.5 outs. Just his tweet here. Someone's sleeping on this one. He's reached 21 outs in 6 of his last 8 starts, has a 1.37 ERA in 6 home starts, where he's done this in 5 of them. He faces the A's, who ranked 28th in OPS on the road over the last month. I'm riding with my guy Joe there. 1 unit play, but give me Chris Sale over 18.5 outs. And by the way, it's plus 150 on there. So a little juice on that as well, the other direction. My favorite bet of the day, and this is arguably my favorite baseball bet of the season. Arguably, it's the most I've put on a bet. I haven't had a 6-unit MLB bet. I've had a few 5 units. I think I've hit all of them so far. But at 7:15, we're going with the over in Cincinnati and Chicago, set at 7. Over 7. 4 straight overs have cashed for the Cubs, 6 of the last 8. Both of these bullpens have really struggled. The Cubs have had success against Hunter Green. The Reds have had success against Justin Steele, who has been struggling. I know that the line is being set as if you've got Cy Young Justin Steele from last year. He's got a 4.6 ERA. He's still recovering from an injury that kept him out for about a month this year. 7 is just ridiculously low. I probably would have bet this at 9 or at least at 8.5. So for it to be 7, like it has to be like a 3-2 game for you to like a 4-2 game for you to lose. Like I just, it's a really low scoring game generally, just on average, especially for these teams with these bullpens, with the success that these lineups have against each other. I think that, total should only really be 7 if you've got like 2 Cy Young candidates on the mound against each other. Too much can happen after the starters check out of the game anyway. So at 7:15, I also have my second favorite play of the day, over 7.5 Angels Mariners. Reed Detmers is terrible. Mariners hit 290 against them in about 88 Bs. Angels hit 300 unlimited. Bryce Miller ABs. I like Bryce Miller, but I don't think he's some guy who can't be gotten to. So going to be the over at 7.5 there for 3 units. And then one of my other favorite plays of the day here, Brandon Marsh RBI at plus 240 for 3 units. Marsh is 2 for 2 with a walk against Sonny Gray. He's had 2 hits last night against the righty. And that's my point. I might bet Marsh in some sort of way every single time that he's in the lineup against a right-handed pitcher. He's one of the very best hitters in all of Major League Baseball, consistently hitting righties over the last few years. He has an 870 OPS against righties this year with a 298 average. Now you ask, why would that be plus 240 for him to RBI then? It's because I think these props are not just based on how he hits against righties. These props, they take their full stats into an account. Brandon Marsh is hitting 139 with a 399 OPS against lefties. He can't hit lefties. I get it. I couldn't do it in high school either. I'm a left-handed hitter myself. It comes in a weird way. There's something about lefty on lefty. It's not meant to, if you can do it, you're like, you're a wizard. But Marsh is hitting 139 with a 399 OPS against lefties. That brings all of the stats down. And I think Vegas is taking a look when he's going against these righties, and they're going, oh, he's like a 260 hitter or whatever. And they throw out a plus 240 number. And I think you can really eat when he's going up against the righty. I got it at plus 220 last night. He RBI'd in like the second inning, or maybe it was the first or second inning. It was early in the game. So Brandon Marsh RBI plus 240, one of my favorite bets of the day. And that's kind of an auto bet going forward. First 5 fills minus half a run. That's a 1-unit play. I'm going to the game. Ranger day. Kyle Schwarber RBI is my other one, plus 185. Now you ask, why not do a home run? It's only like plus 250. They know about June Schwarber. They know what the calendar says, and it's plus 250. Normally, I would say just take the home run. He doesn't get hits anyway. Like everything Schwarber does is a homer or a walk or a strikeout. But as we just discussed, that's not really the case this year. Like Kyle has been hitting some singles, hitting some doubles, and getting on base other ways than homers and walks. So I think that's not a big enough disparity between RBI and home run, plus 185 to plus 250. I'll just take the RBI in case there's a guy on third and he gets sack fly. Like I'll take one plus 185, even if it's a little less juicy. At 10:05, my last play of the day, I'll save the hockey plays for a friend of mine later. At 10:05, we've got the Yankees plus 105 for 1 unit against the San Francisco Giants. Logan Webb's on the mound. The Giants have the clear advantage here. That's why the Yankees are underdogs. I'm of the belief that the Yankees just shouldn't be underdogs to the San Francisco Giants. So give me the Yankees on the money line. Those are my plays of the day. Anything there that caught your guys' eye? Anything?
Yeah, love it. Well done. I'm with you on the Marsh stuff. That I am all in on the Brandon Marsh just hype train. Really, how good he's been. That this is a dude that I know it's kind of a little bit of a controversial conversation as well. But I think Marsh should be on the field every single day. He should be in the lineup every day. I think he's that level to this point. So I'm with you on anything that supports that.
But that's the stat I just gave is the problem with it. He just can't hit lefties. 139. Yeah. I was vocal about it. And last year was a little better against lefties. I think it was like a 680 OPS. Like that's passable. Like it was a passable OPS last year against lefties, although Pesci was actually a little better against lefties last year. I was vocal about hating it I'm at the point now where I think Topper actually is doing the right thing. You keep his confidence high when you throw him out there against righties. And then also the thing that he wasn't doing early in the year, and he didn't do it times last year, that really upset me. He's been doing it lately. In the games Marsh sits, if they bring a righty in later in the game, Marsh is pinch hitting. And Marsh is getting in the game. That has to happen every time, especially with a close game. Marsh should be in anytime there's a righty. He's simply one of the best hitters in baseball against right-handed pitching. It's just that simple. So I struggle with it. The one I get mad about is Stott. When Stott sits against lefties, he has a higher career OPS against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching. It just doesn't make any sense to act like he's a platoon guy. He's one of those guys that really does just hit it from both sides. So that drives me up a wall. But Jeremy looks like he's going to say something. Yeah.
I do like your Yankees bet. I don't think the Yankees should ever be underdogs. I think that they are such a good team. The Phillies were the first team to 40 wins this year because the Yankees played later at night. The Yankees.
Did they get to 40 last night?
Yeah, they hit 40 last night.
Okay.
They are so good. Aaron Judge is the best. He might be the best baseball player on the planet. I don't know if you look at his stats. Have you seen his numbers though? He's playing.
So Mr. Betts numbers? And I'm not talking Shohei Ohtani, by the way. I'm talking about.
No, I know. But just Aaron Judge.
You like that, Sean? That was a good one.
Yeah, that was a good one.
20 home runs with a 1,056 OPS, a 648 slugging, 20 homers, 45 RBIs. He's leading the league in homers, in OPS, in doubles. He's playing so phenomenal, and the Yankees around him are also just playing so well. I mean, on the betting site that I see, it's to pick them at -110. I don't understand how it's even that close just because Logan Webb is on the mound. This Yankees team is so good, and the Giants are, they're a very average team, and they have a good pitcher on the mound today. The Yankees are World Series favorites with some of the best baseball players on their team, so I do like that.
I'll excuse myself a little. Mookie's cooled off a bit. Mookie has cooled off a bit.
Cooling off from how he started.
Yeah, he's still hitting 326, but
he's still absolutely insane. But that start of the year for Mookie, I didn't know if it was ever going to end. It was scary.
He's still the NL MVP favorite, Mookie.
As he should be.
937 OPS, but yeah, Judge is at like a 1060 here. So
he's playing insane, man. He's mashing the ball.
Not to mention the guy who's on their team, who they just got, who's almost going under the radar. Juan Soto's been unbelievable as well. He's hitting 311 with a 990 OPS. He's been like a top 3 player in baseball. And that was actually my initial, when you said Judge is the best player in baseball, my initial pushback was like, I don't know if he's the best player on his own team. He has been this year. I think ultimately I would take Soto. I don't think that's a hot take either.
I think it kind of
Judge
is.
If you look at the longer view of Aaron, Judge has had some down years and rough stretches of late. So on the wide,
Judge is a 5-tool player. He doesn't do anything wrong. I think Aaron Judge is insane. I think he's better than Soto. I get Soto might have a better swing contact wise. Judge has more power, way better fielder, way better arm. They're probably around the same speed. So an overall player, I'm taking Aaron Judge, but that's no disrespect to Juan Soto. I think Juan Soto is such a smart hitter that's where he can be higher up than Aaron Judge. But I think that there's only a small amount of categories where Juan Soto is a little bit better than Judge. And I think Judge is a lot better in a lot better aspects.
I think Soto's a better hitter.
Oh yeah, I get
Judge is obviously a way better fielder, and Soto's a bad fielder. So that's a huge gap. That's the biggest gap of any.
Yeah.
But I think Soto's a better hitter. Just I know that Judge is feels crazy to say. He's like a 50 home run hitter. He has a 1050 OPS right now, 1060, whatever it is. But I mean, Soto is just the most patient hitter I've ever seen. He's Ted Williams.
Judge. I'm looking at Judge's numbers. 2 years ago, he had an 1111 OPS. Last year, he had a 1.019, and this year so far he has a 1.056. He is with home runs of 62, 37, and 20 so far this year, and it's June 1st. What I didn't do the math. I'm gonna look up the math in a couple minutes. I don't know what how many home runs he's projected to hit, but he's hit 20 home runs in 2 months. That equals out to a lot of home runs.
Yeah, no, that's insane. But yeah, I mean, and he missed some. I think he missed a week too or something in there as well. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, I mean that's crazy. By the way, I want to point something out. I feel like a couple weeks ago, I forget when it was, I came on here and I was saying, the Twins. I was all in on the Twins. I was saying, watch out for this team to win the AL.
This was last week.
Huh?
You were saying this last week.
Oh, okay, but I think I said this 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then they went on a crazy losing streak where they lost 7 in a row. And then last week I came on and I was like, all right, they've righted the ship a little bit, and they're like, I think they'll be fine. I think I said last week that they would still win the division. Now they're 8-2 in the last 10. They've won 3 in a row. I think the Twins are here. I think they're still, by the way, 6 games out of Cleveland. Cleveland's playing their minds out. I mean, 38-19 for Cleveland. Go through that roster and tell me why Cleveland's 38-19. It's crazy. Jose Ramirez. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's it.
But yeah, he's unbelievable. But yeah, it's been I actually think it's been a really fun baseball year. Feels like the stars are starring. Like Odo, Shohei, Mookie, and that's just 2 teams. But I guess the Braves would beg to differ a little bit on the stars starring. So with how some of their guys have played, Kyle Tucker's been unbelievable. Jose Ramirez, Bryce Harper obviously has been awesome. Corey Seager, Pete Alonso's still hitting homers. Like it's most of the guys who are supposed to do, supposed to be the faces of the league are being the faces of the league right now.
Alec Boehm, Ranger Suarez, all those faces of the league. Yeah.
Ranger Suarez is professional sports in America. Yeah. All right, let's real quick before we completely kind of dive in on the other side. Real quick, I wanted to talk something about the Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks. What you saw this postseason was the peak of what the Minnesota Timberwolves will accomplish with this nucleus on the team. We all know that, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Rudy Gobert stuff is probably the most glaring conversation that I think you're flirting around right now. I do think that there's a limit to what Rudy can, we know he's Defensive Player of the Year, 4th time, all these things you throw at him. He's been a guy that's been played out of the floor in the playoffs in multiple different locations. And I think this year, honestly, was one of his better performances overall in a playoff series. And he's found ways to make a little bit more of an impact. But I just think there's limitations to his skill set. And I think that's kind of the root of this conversation. There's also concerns with Karl-Anthony Towns as well.
And I know what you're doing. And I get it. And I don't disagree with anything you said there. But we are talking about a team that won a Game 7 on the road where their superstar went 5 for 19 or 5 for 20. So
6 for 24, I think it was.
Oh, 6 for 24. So worse than I said. Okay. I was wrong. 6 for 24. So he went 6 for 24 in a Game 7. And this team that everyone's telling me now is terrible outside of Anthony Edwards won a Game 7 on the road with their star shooting 6 for 24. So I know what's going to happen over the next couple years. And I know Minnesota's going to be like at the Pelicans. They're going to be like a 47, 48 win team who flirts with the play-in and maybe gets out of the play-in. Maybe they'll be a little bit better because Rudy Gobert is a regular season kind of riser. And they generally is on good regular season teams. But I think that's where they're going to be, and everyone's going to continuously make the Gobert excuse. I think Anthony Edwards should almost thank Gobert because he'll never get blamed for anything as long as Rudy Gobert is a Timberwolf because of how much hate there is countrywide and league-wide for Rudy Gobert.
That's definitely true. Yeah.
I mean, I have never seen a player in sports that is as universally hated as Rudy Gobert. There's no Rudy Gobert. It's so funny because any podcast you listen to, you'll have people defending him and they'll be like, now, I'm not a Rudy Gobert fan. I've never heard that sentence more. I feel, and you've done it too on the show. Yeah. It's now I'm not a Rudy Gobert guy. Everyone has to preface any positive thing they ever say about Gobert with well, listen, I think he sucks. But there's that level with Gobert, and he's the only player I see that exists with. But we saw what happened when Anthony Edwards went up against a real superstar, a real bona fide top 5, bring your team to the promised land guy. Everything pretended Anthony Edwards to be, everything that they pretended to compare him to Michael Jordan, the guy who should be compared to Michael Jordan, and I don't even know if he should be, but if you're going to compare anyone to Michael Jordan, I said this last week on the show. Michael Jordan averaged 33 points per game in the playoffs. He's the number one career points per game leader of all time. Number 2 is Luka Doncic.
Yep.
And what was I saying throughout the first 2 rounds? Anthony Edwards was getting 1,000,000% of the media attention. No one's talking about Shea. No one's talking about Luka. No one's talking about Tatum. No one's talking about anybody but Anthony Edwards. And my problem with that was he's not Luka Doncic. He's not Jason Tatum. He's not those guys. And people want him to be. People really, really, really want him to be in a way I'd never seen with a star.
Yeah, so I'll start with, for starters, Luka, cold-blooded killer, that this is what he does. Like, there's no doubt about it, and I think that's the lead here is, like, even that Game 5, like, it was clear from the moment that game started that Luka Doncic was not losing that game under any circumstance. Did not matter if he had to score 75 points himself. Did not matter if he needed 35 assists to get his done. He was finding a way, and he made that clear. Luka is that dude. And by the way, I do think that we're going to see this in the finals as well. But I think we're going to see there's a gap between Luka Doncic and Jason Tatum when projecting how good these guys really are. Now, the Anthony Edwards conversation, I'll start with, for starters, he's 22 years old, that this is not the finished product, Anthony Edwards. I hear you that the crown may have been placed on his head a little early. Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. The problem is I didn't put him in the conversation of being a superstar top 5 player in the world and comparing him to the best players in the world and comparing him to the greatest player of all time, or maybe second, depending on who you talk to, but comparing him to Michael Jordan. Like, I'm not the one who did that at age 22. So anyone who wants to say, well, slow down, he's only 22. You weren't telling me to slow down when you were saying he was the face of the league 2 weeks ago. That's the problem I have with the he's only 22 conversation.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I do think that, like, for starters, and again, like, this was a successful season by the Timberwolves. This was a huge stride forward as a franchise, and, like, it should be looked at as a success, even though they did get waxed by the Mavericks in embarrassing fashion to close that one out. But beating the Nuggets the way they did, taking a Game 7 in Denver, these are things that are huge strides forward. I do think that there are some real look yourself in the mirror questions for Minnesota. To bring it back to the Gobert things and tie it to Anthony Edwards here, you got to give Edwards more room to attack, and that's not what Gobert does. That you see the way he clogs the lane, and, like, that leads to some of these Anthony Edwards tough turnarounds, that side of things. I do think they need to address that. I think that's the biggest pro to Karl Anthony Towns as a big man, is you can play true 5-out basketball. You can have this ideal spacing, and you basically ruined all these pros by bringing in a Gobert. And I get, like, the defensive side of things. That's clearly the identity they're leaning into with the Jaden McDaniels of the world and these other guys getting in passing lanes, Nickeil Alexander-Walker making an impact. I think that there has to be some hard conversations within the Minnesota locker room. I don't think that they can take that next stride with both Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert, but I don't feel in my heart of hearts that in the long run, this is an Anthony Edwards issue by any means. I still think that he can be that level of guy moving forward, but there's no doubt he's not there just yet.
Yeah, I don't think he will be that level of guy, just because I think it's so rare. There's only a few of those guys, and that was my whole problem with him being crowned as that before he averaged 25 a game. Like, he hasn't done that in his career, so I'd like to see him do that before we make him Michael Jordan. But that's just me. And yeah, there's the Minnesota thing. Gobert's on that team forever. I mean, Gobert's on that team. What's his contract? 4 more years? Like, Gobert's on that team until that contract is up. So they're not trading that. They're not getting rid of that. If you're making any moves, it's Cat. And I think you're not going to get fair value back for Cat, because his opinion league-wide, I think, is way off. I think he's better than people think. But I just don't know what the move is. And I think Jaden McDaniels is good. Like, you're probably not going to get better value for trading him, but he's probably the right guy. Like, I just don't know what the move is. Whereas OKC, they've got 1 million picks to trade. Minnesota cashed all their picks in for Rudy Gobert. So
for what it's worth, the Gobert contract that he's got 1 year left next year at 43.8 and then a player option at 46.6. He's, of course, going to pick that up.
I'll report that he's picking that up.
Yeah, I think that's a good call on that one there. But, like, I guess my point being, like, there is at least an end in sight to a regard. If you do got to get rid of it, that's not the long-term hold you down in the way that I think it's talked about at times. So you can survive 2 more years with Rudy Gobert if you have to. And Anthony Edwards is just 24 at that point. So then you can kind of shift to a new direction and figure out what actually needs to be the case. But yeah, they did cash in their ticket a little early on that one. And Gobert's just a flawed basketball player, man. He's excellent at the things that he does, but he's so limited in the things that he can do. So it's a difficult spot to be in as a team.
by the time Gobert's gone and Anthony Edwards is 24 and all the hype beasts have thrown him in the trash for Wembenyama averaging 45, 15, and 10, and Cooper Flag, yeah, the next guy's up. It'll be sorry, Ant, you were our guy for a while. Trae Young was people's guy for a while when he went on a conference finals run. We all thought, Atlanta going forward, wow. One last thing, I have to go to break, but this is actually less of an Ant issue, less of a Minnesota Timberwolves issue. How many people have you heard say, like, oh, they'll be back again, man? Or like, this is just the first time here for Ant. Like, that has been said about so many young athletes and so many young cores and so many young teams. I've lost count how many times I've heard that. I remember the one that actually, this is a bad example now because it ended up panning out. Strasburg, when they didn't play him in the playoffs, and it's like, they'll be back. It took them a long time. They like 5 years later ended up winning the World Series, so it sounds like a bad example now. But there's so many examples. Obviously, the Thunder. Obviously, Joel going up to Ben and saying, like, as they're walking off the court, losing to the Celtics, pointing to the ring, saying they're going to get rings together or whatever.
Pacers this year, I think, is going to be an example of it.
Oh, 100%. Anyone who thinks like, the Pacers, they'll be right back. Like, you just don't understand how this league works and how fast it moves and how fast teams grow and how fast superstars rise up. So I think that people have I just think in general, this young team will be back is usually wrong. And I think that perfectly encapsulates, like you said, Indiana and Minnesota. Let's take a break. On the other side, we're sticking on the hardwood. We're sticking basketball. Actually, before we get to the Sixers, we'll talk a little finals. We'll talk a little Mavs, a little Celtics, and then we'll get to the Sixers. We'll talk our ideal offseason. Second hour, all basketball coming up next.
In this week's Marketers Report, we learn about the value of local influence.
Apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Hey guys, did you know there's a generic form of Viagra that works just the same, but is 95% cheaper? And you can get it online? Go to hims.com/joy. Through Hims, you'll get a free medical consultation, discreet shipping if prescribed, and the process is 100% online. To start your free online visit, go to hims.com/joy. That's HIMS.com/JOY.
Here's what's trending from the iHeart Sports Network, presented by DraftKings Fantasy Sports.
The Phillies continue their three-game series against the Cards tonight at Citizens Bank Park. Ranger Suarez will toe the rubber for the Phils, who won yesterday's opener. The Eagles are still in the market for a receiver after Devontae Parker announced his retirement, and they're reportedly interested in former Jets receiver Corey Davis. The Eagles kick off mandatory minicamp on Tuesday. And the Oilers beat the Stars in Dallas and are now a win away from reaching the Stanley Cup Finals. I'm Bill Horrenda.
Check out what DraftKings has to offer this season with code SPORTS, because life's more fun when you're in on the action. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details.
Portions of the following program were pre-recorded.
Your home for Villanova basketball is WDAS and WD273D. Fox Sports Radio Philadelphia.
Welcome back to the Tough Cover Radio Show. Second hour here. We're talking a lot of basketball. Real quick, by the way, this Happy Gilmore hat, $3 from Target. $3. It was in the little clearance, like July 4th section, or July 4th. What am I talking about? Memorial Day section. I don't know why it's a Memorial Day thing. $3. I was like, I'm absolutely buying this hat for $3. Comfortable, by the way.
Love it.
Shout out to Target. What's the
Target?
Target. That's what people call it. Yeah. Definitely not what I said. But the most hits by left-handed batters against left-handed pitchers in 2024. This is a stat I just saw on Twitter that I had to bring up. The most hits by left-handed batters against left-handed pitchers. Who is first in Major League Baseball? But slap hitter Kyle Schwarber. 29 hits against left-handed pitching for a lefty there. And Schwarber at 29, right in front of Luis Arias, Yordan Alvarez, and Shohei Ohtani. So that's pretty wild stuff for Kyle Schwarber. But let's get over to basketball. Let's get over to the Sixers and talk some missing third star stuff, as you just talked about on Twitter. And one thing I'll say before we get into the real conversation, because I think you'll be with me when it comes to this conversation. And there was a time that I was open to this name. There was a time where this name was, somewhat interesting to me, but I got in a little bit of, argument today with Legs on Twitter and with Marty Teller on Twitter. I just wanted known if the Sixers trade for Zach LaVine this offseason, Daryl Morey should be fired for not getting that job done last November. If Zach LaVine is the answer, wasting a year to get to this point is abominable.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly far down on my list. I'm definitely not as out on him as I think you seem to be. I think LaVine is far better than the perception of him at this point. Like, the dude has been a real deal all-star. The dude is a high-level shooter. He's averaged as much as 27.4 points per game, and through his career, a 38.2% three-point shooter, has shot 41.9% on 8.2 attempts per game in a season before. When he's committed, he will defend a little bit. He's certainly a guy that you do have to attach stuff to. That's a lot of the reports that I've been seeing is the Bulls would consider attaching an asset. If we're starting to talk about a Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso deal, that's where my interest starts to peak up a little bit. So for sure, does not fall in the same category of like the third star or these guys that we're going to speak of, the Paul George, the Jimmy Butler, the Brandon Ingrams that we're going to get into here. He's not on that level, but I'm not a full out in the same way that I think you are. I
think my point is if you can't get one of those deals done, burn the building down, move the franchise to Camden. That's where I'm at. And I hate to be that way, but that is the eggs that Daryl Morey has put in the basket of this offseason. When you waste a year and you say, don't worry, we have the cap space. Don't worry, we can do whatever. Don't worry, we'll have all these picks to trade. It can't be, oh, well, we took Zach LaVine because they also gave us Alex Caruso for free. that can't be what we just wasted a year for. It just can't be. If that's it, I'm done. If it's Levine and by the way, like that is 53 like 53 of the 65 million potential dollars that you'd have. You have if you do that, you got nothing else. You can go get like Kelly Oubre. You're bringing back Joel Maxey, Levine, Caruso, Kelly Oubre, and a mid-level guy, the 16th pick, and 6 minimum guys. That would be your roster.
I mean, so Zach LaVine, do you think he's still a top 50 NBA player?
I don't know because he didn't play at all last year. And then when he came back, they were worse with him. And when Kobe White stepped into his role, he really stepped into a role. Like I was pretty high on Zach LaVine as an option last year in terms of let's try to do something to compete and let's go get someone that we can go out and compete this year. Now that there's a lot more options potentially on the table, I trade every asset we have to make sure I didn't have to go and deal with a consolation prize like Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso. If that means trading every pick we have for Brandon Ingram, that's what it means. If it means, whatever, Paul George, Jimmy Butler, LeBron, Brandon Ingram, like if you can't get one of those guys, I'm sorry, or Mikhail, if you can't get one of those, or Laurie Markkinen, like I am throwing enough names out. Like if you can't get one of those guys, you really have messed up by building this offseason that's what the ship's built out of.
Yeah, I guess I'll put it this way: is I would take the Levine and Caruso over kicking the can down the curb another year. That I can't have that. I can't have another wasted Joel Embiid season that we don't know how many more there truly will be. With like Caruso and Levine, I feel like there's a puncher's chance. And the last thing that I'll say for kind of why I think it's a fit is he is a guy with direct ties to both Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. That he's a New Balance guy, he's a Clutch Sports guy, and he's a Drew Hanlon guy. So Tyrese Maxey, of course, is a Clutch Sports guy, has done a little bit with Drew Hanlon himself as well, that he's trained. Levine has trained directly with Joel under Drew Hanlon. Those are all things that like we don't have that many connections, and there's really not this like network of basketball players that Joel Embiid seems to have relationships with. So if that's a guy that he speaks highly of and believes in, then I'd be willing to take a chance on it. And I do think that like the pendulum's at an all-time low for Zach LaVine, certainly, that there is a real world where he's ready for a new situation, can have a better, like the talent level is absolutely there for LaVine. And I think people kind of ignore that sometimes.
Yeah, I'm out. It can't be him for 45 million or whatever it is. Like that just can't be it. It can't.
Just 2 more years on the contract, by the way.
I don't care about that. And that's actually a big announcement I want to make right now. Anyone who tells me, oh, can you pay Paul George that much? Don't care. Oh, well, Brandon Ingram's contract's coming up. Do you care about what you pay him? Don't care. Jimmy Butler's contract's coming up. Do you care about what you pay him? Don't care. LeBron's 40. Do you care about what you pay him? Don't care. The Sixers will never have cap space again. Joel Embiid's going to make more money going forward each year. Tyrese Maxey, after we do whatever we're going to do, is going to sign a massive deal. And we're not just going to leave all this open cap space again for next year because it's not possible. If you sign Maxey, you would only have room for like one more max guy anyway. So it's even if everything else was gone. If next year if let's say we signed only 1-year deals, everyone on the team besides Joel and Maxey is a 1-year deal. So we're in the same spot again next year. We'd have like 35 million in cap space.
Yeah.
That's not going to be what happens. We're going to commit to multiple guys for a longer term deal. I don't care about the money. It's never going to matter again, the money. So that's just an in general bubble conversation, like for all things in this conversation. That's a big point I want to make.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. The only like slight asterisk that I'll throw in this is Paul George is a slightly different story for me from the standpoint of you can just outright sign him versus the Brandon Ingrams, the Jimmy Butlers you do have to trade for, give into the draft pick. So for me, by far, the option one for this offseason is you give Paul George a max, you keep all those draft picks in stock, and then you can start wheeling and dealing and swinging those for players in a way that like in other situations like Jimmy Butler, for example, here, you're trading those assets to get him and then giving him that contract. So I'm with you from the salary cap standpoint, but I do think Paul George is the slight difference in that because he's an actual free agent here.
So here's the one thing, and I agree, Paul George is the number one bullet 1A option. I think anyone out there who's, worried about Paul George, and I think it's dumb. If you have the opportunity to do it, you do it. I've always had that opinion for years on Paul George. I've always said he could be the hypothetical perfect guy to plug in. Even when we were talking about Ben and Joel, I always said that Paul George would be the hypothetical perfect guy to plug in. But the thing about it is, the thing I'll push back slightly on, and everyone says it, like you sign Paul George and you keep all the assets. It's true. But once you sign Paul George, you have about $16 million in cap space to play out with. At that point, what players make $16 million or less that we can trade those picks for that would be worth it? Caruso's one, by the way.
Yeah, for sure.
But for Caruso's high on that list. But that's where I struggle a little bit, where it's like you trade for him, you've got 16 million cap space to fill out the rest of your team, and you have those picks, but whoever you trade those picks for is going to make money. So I almost think, and you're not going to like hearing this, if you sign Paul George, there's going to be an aspect of kicking the can and giving Oubre and Batum tradable contracts and maybe 1-year deals, and you retain those picks. You basically just bring Paul George in, and you bring the rest of the team back, and you get some tradable contracts, and you hope something pops free that you can combine the Oubre and Batum contracts and trade picks with. I think that's probably what you do if you sign Paul George. There's just my issue with the Paul George thing that I keep coming back to, and I do it like without thinking. You figure out the rest later. Is just what's the rest of the roster look like? How are you filling out the rest of the roster for the time being? That's where I struggle.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of this, the selling point is when you start to build a contender, like if you build it, they will come type of thing, that you do get these end of the career veterans. The Sixers have not had success in that department to much of an extent whatsoever. So I do think that's a little bit of an optimistic view. I do think you can pull more of like the pseudo impact role players than you're giving credit with the under 16 million, like the Royce O'Neals of the world and players like that are making 9 million that he's on the books for, that you can find. Like if you hit on 2 of those guys, that's a massive win. And we're talking about like a real deal contender roster right here. I get, again, easier said than done in that situation. But like you kind of got to have that outlook that people are going to like it here. You're going to get some Kyle Lowry type situations who, again, that's a unique one where he wanted to come home to Philadelphia and all those type of things. But you're going to have to hope that that is the case. And Paul George is a guy with enough of a relationship around the league that is well respected and well liked. Honestly, looked up to far more than I expected to be the case. And you're seeing even like the quotes of people calling him their GOAT and stuff like that, which I think is very, very strong there. But I do
cool sneakers. I really do think that's a part of it, actually. But.
Yeah, and I think he's a cool guy. Like I think that's a part of it as well. Is that he's likable. His podcast, I think, like has opened him up a little bit. That I did listen to that quite a bit this week. He had on Alex Sarr and Reed Shepherd, so got a little view into them there. But
I can't stand his one co-host. I got into it with him a while back when Roan got into it with him.
Oh yeah.
I can't stand that dude.
Fair. But
potato head looking dude.
As a whole, I think like the NBA is a copycat league from a roster construction standpoint. That for a point in time, it was this big 3 era that you needed the 3 stars, and the pendulum has certainly shifted back towards you get your 2 stars and you find these role players to optimize them. In either world, you just have to hit. Like for the Sixers here, the main gamble is that Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid is good enough to basically carry your team, and you could find guys to do the rest. The other side of things, like you have to gamble and make sure that is the case. An example of it going wrong is out there in Phoenix, where Bradley Beal is not quite carrying his weight, although he played better down the stretch of the season than I think he gets credit. The other side of that, if you're going this role player strategy, for starters, these guys are expensive now. Like Bruce Brown is making $25 million this season. Like those guys, once they're known to be like surefire role players, they get paid. That's part of the issue here. And if they're not who you think you are, you're in the same boat. That if you're thinking you an 8-man rotation come playoff time, you get there and it turns out only 6 of them are ready for that level of minutes. That's an issue too. So there's flaws to both kind of mindsets here. For me, all outcomes point to, you know exactly who Paul George is. If he's available, you do everything to bring him in.
I agree. I generally do agree. And by the way, a big part of all of this is the 16th pick needs to be used without trading it on a guy who can come in and be a role player. I think all these cap space issues and concerns, whatever concerns you have with Paul George or anyone that you bring in, that one of the ways to alleviate that is adding a role player for something that doesn't count against the cap before free agency, basically, which is of the 16th pick. So you can add that, and that won't impact what we have to do. It's the only way I can see another cheap role player getting added without having. It's just one of the only avenues that they have towards a cheap role player. So you cannot trade that for a guy who makes 8 or 9 million. Like, or even Caruso. Like, I don't want to trade the 16th pick for Caruso. Trade the future picks. All that matters is right now to me. I want the picks gone. I trade the picks for assets that matter in Joel's prime right now. And I'm not even that guy. I've kind of fought against being that guy a lot of times, but we're at that point. We really are at that point.
For what it's worth, like for all the talks about this being an all-time bad draft class and all that type of things, there's a lot of older guys that look ready to step into a right now role, more so than I would say most draft classes. And that's exactly who the Sixers should be targeting. So at that 16th pick, I think there's a lot of options for that category of player. You got to capitalize on that.
I totally agree. Now, let's get into real quick, actually. We'll just talk about the other two before we get to the main course. I'll take a break before we get to the main course. But we'll talk about Jimmy and LeBron. And just because I think they both go in the same kind of bucket. I don't think either are leaving the spot they're in. I don't think LeBron's leaving the Lakers. And I really don't think Jimmy's leaving Miami. I think a lot of this is just posturing to try to get him to take a little less money on the next deal, which isn't even imminent right now, right? It's after next year. So I think, I don't think either guy leaves. I don't want Jimmy Butler. I understand like the basketball argument for it. I mean, I will say him and Brandon Ingram had the exact same season last year, except Brandon Ingram shot a lot more threes, whatever, and played more games. But that's another conversation because Brandon Ingram's got games played issues too. So I can't really lean that heavily on that. And I don't even really care that much about that. But the Jimmy Butler thing is an age issue as well. He might just completely lose athleticism, which he's not a 3-point shooter. That is a huge problem. If he loses some athleticism, that's going to hurt his defense more than anything, which is one of the main things you're trading for. And I just don't think defense is like what I'm focused on when I'm adding this third star. Defense has never been the problem in the playoffs. The problem's always been half court offense. So that's my one thing that I'll interject there. But Jimmy Butler is a non-basketball issue for me. I just don't want the story of the process to be like, well, they got Jimmy Butler back and Joel needed him all along. And what will happen if Jimmy Butler's on this team, and no one cares about this except for me, and I know that, I'm a weirdo. What will happen if Jimmy Butler's on this team is that every time we win and Joel has 30 and Maxey has 28 and Jimmy has 22, Jimmy will be the main story. And when we lose, Jimmy will get no blame and Joel will get all the blame. That's how it would work if the Sixers traded for Jimmy Butler, 1,000,000%. If they win the title, the storyline will be that Joel had to be the Robin to Jimmy's Batman, and Jimmy had to come in and lead the Sixers to a title. And if they lost, it would be, wow, even Joel's such a loser that Jimmy can't even win with him. And he won with Bam Adebayo and yada, yada, yada. All this stuff, that is absolutely how it would play out. The narrative of it all, I'd rather jump off, several bridges than deal with the narrative of Jimmy Butler coming back to the Sixers. And I understand that some people feel that way about LeBron. And I get that. People hate LeBron. I think it's ridiculous, but that's a whole other conversation for another day. My co-host would disagree with me. He's a known hater.
Would also absolutely take him on the Sixers. No,
yeah, I there's no question. By the way, we said Paul George is the number one option. LeBron James is the number one option. I'm in. I truly believe that this would be the best team LeBron's been on since the 2016 Cavs.
Oh yeah.
And he won a title in 2020.
And he can have his nights where he takes over and beats LeBron James, and has his nights where he sits back and lets Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid do everything, which honestly I think would be perfect for him at this point in his career. It is interesting. We got the reports yesterday that the Sixers are showing interest in Bronny James. I know we were texting back and forth a little bit. That is not a coincidence that just yesterday the Lakers were officially awarded the number 17th pick in this year's draft. The Sixers coincidentally tend to be picking in the number 16 slot there. So I do think that's correlated. From all accounts around, that there's been a little bit of a softening on this LeBron wants to play with Bronny or is dead set on playing with his son. But that is a level of leverage that only one team is going to get. I don't think that's the route. I would prefer Daryl Morey not do that, especially without the knowledge that LeBron is definitely coming. But if taking Bronny at 16 means you get LeBron James, you straight up do it. There's no doubt about it.
Of course. Yeah, of course you do it. It's no questions asked. You do it. LeBron, I am just convinced that if LeBron comes here, I think we win the title next year. Like, and I know that sounds crazy. I really do. Like, I think he could kind of settle into like a point guard role to a certain degree. And Maxey, you get him off ball. And that is something that matters so much to me about this third star. And I know Paul George delineates from that, but the benefit you get with Paul George is such elite defense on top of shooting 9 threes a game and being one of the true 3-point launchers in the NBA, which is what Paul George is. And that's really the biggest benefit of adding Paul George to the Sixers. That's what it would be. But in terms of the main thing I would like to add is a guy like a LeBron or a guy like the guy we'll talk about after the break, Brandon Ingram, that can really, really handle and can really run the offense. LeBron's obviously a much different situation. LeBron's LeBron James. But yeah, if you can get a guy that gets Maxey off the ball, I think that's the best potential outcome for the Sixers with their third star. But just ultimately, what do you put the likelihood on? Put a percentage chance on either LeBron just leaving LA or Jimmy being traded? Not even here.
Yeah, low. And unfortunately, to be honest, I don't think the Paul George likelihood is nearly as high as I think a lot of people talk about it either. That I think it's more likely than not that he re-signs with the Clippers and absolutely stays there. I'd probably put for Paul George probably around like 65% that's the case. For LeBron leaving LA, probably put it like 15% that's the case. And for Jimmy, I probably put it like 25%. So in all cases, not ideal there. But yeah, I think unfortunately for the Sixers, and this is part of my fear, is we're looking down the barrel of all these guys going back exactly where they started, which does not put the Sixers in a good spot.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Paul George is like a 30% chance of leaving LA. I think LeBron's got like literally like a 5% chance of leaving LA. And I think Jimmy's like 20. So I put all those, at that. The funny thing about, I said that, like, just the chances of them being traded or leaving, not just coming here. I'll tell you what, there's not a lot of outcomes where LeBron leaves LA and goes anywhere but here. Go look around the cap space situations. Like, there's not a lot of situations that he could even go to other than staying in LA or going to Philly, the only good team with cap space. He's not living in Oklahoma. So, and then the other thing is Jimmy. If Jimmy gets traded, I think it's here. Like, I really do think if Jimmy got traded, I think it would be here. It would make me literally miserable. I don't think I could root for the team anymore. Like, it would really create serious issues for me. But that's a whole other conversation. That's independent of me. But yeah, I don't think any of them are coming here. But if they get traded, this is probably where it would be. I just think they're staying where they're staying. So that leaves us. And, there's Lauri Markkanen, who seems like he's not getting traded. There's McHale, who seems like he's not getting traded. It leaves us with, to me, besides Paul George and maybe LeBron, the best potential option, which is Brandon Ingram. And on the other side, we'll talk about Brandon Ingram, positives, negatives, what you could do outside of him to add to the team. On the other side, back up to this.
The biggest stars in the universe
are on a collision course
with one stage. Our legendary iHeartRadio Music Festival, presented by Capital One, returns.
Re-entering the Las Vegas atmosphere this September. Stream live only on Hulu.
Be here as our 2024 iHeartRadio Music Festival lineup is revealed.
Tuesday morning at 8.
Stop by Rita's today and try the new Kool-Aid Tropical Punch Ice. Oh, yeah.
Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler. Now, total traffic for Philadelphia.
Well, for starters, if you're heading down toward the Jersey Shore, you have a reasonably good ride overall, except for some extra heavy traffic on the freeway southbound 130 on Through Creek Road. The AC Expressway Garden State Parkway looking pretty good. Meanwhile, back to Philadelphia we go, where we find extra heavy volume on southbound 95 because of left lane construction. Woodhaven Road down through Academy. And on the westbound Schuylkill, particularly heavy University through South. And again, Gulf Mills on through 202 from an earlier crash now gone. Eric Herr, Total Traffic.
This report is sponsored by Lowe's. Savings. Now that's speaking the Lowe's language. And with My Lowe's Rewards, your savings just keep coming with member-only offers. Learn more about their new loyalty program at Lowe's.com/My Lowe's Rewards. Subject to terms and conditions. See Lowe's.com/terms for details.
With Memorial Day savings at the Home Depot, you can upgrade your home with up to $2,400 off select kitchen packages from top brands like Maytag. Enhance your kitchen with the exclusive Maytag French door refrigerator and fingerprint-resistant stainless steel, only at the Home Depot. And with dual power filtration on the Maytag Tall Tub dishwasher, you can skip soaking and scrubbing. Right now, get Memorial Day savings up to $2,400 off select kitchen packages at the Home Depot. How doers get more done. Pricing valid May 16th through June 5th. U.S. only. See store or online for details.
You've worked hard for what you have. Your money, your assets, your 401k, and home. Isn't it all worth protecting? Nearly 1 in 4 consumers have been a victim of identity theft. LifeLock Ultimate Plus helps protect your finances with up to $3 million in reimbursement. LifeLock alerts you to identity threats you might miss. And if your identity is stolen, your dedicated U.S.-based restoration specialist will work to fix it. Let LifeLock help protect what you've worked so hard for. Save 25% off your first year on LifeLock Ultimate Plus at LifeLock.com. Use promo code NEWS. Terms apply.
Last season, millions tuned into the Betrayal podcast to hear a shocking story of deception. I'm Andrea Gunning, and now we're sharing an all-new story of betrayal. Justin Rutherford. Doctor, father, family man. It was the perfect cover to hide behind.
I was just like, what in the world is going on?
Listen to Betrayal on America's #1 podcast network, iHeart. Open your free iHeart app and search Betrayal and start listening.
Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Hey guys, did you know there's a generic form of Viagra that works just the same, but is 95% cheaper? And you can get it online? Go to hims.com/joy. Through Hims, you'll get a free medical consultation, discreet shipping if prescribed, and the process is 100% online. To start your free online visit, go to hims.com/joy. That's HIMS.com/JOY.
Hey, man, you all right? Need me to call 911? No, call Top Dog Law. Get top dollar for your accident at TopDogLaw.com. Once again, that's TopDogLaw.com.
Spreads, totals, and all the prop bets in between. It's The Gambler.
Yeah, this album is dedicated to all the teachers that told me I never amount to nothing. To all the people that lived above the buildings that I was hustling from that called the police on me when I was.
Welcome back to the Tough Cover Radio Show right here on The Gambler. Closing it down, talking some hoops. By the way, Phil's game tonight, 7:15. I feel like I didn't touch enough just on I gave my Martian Schwarber bets, but great pitching matchup down at the bank. I'll be there. Give me a shout if you're there. But it's going to be a fun one. Sonny Gray, been one of the very best pitchers in baseball in his first year in St. Louis here. He's got a 2.6 ERA, 7-2, which is incredible on a team that's below 500. Whereas Ranger, we all know what Ranger's been doing. I've got him on. I guess I can show the numbers. I don't have to fully turn around. But he's 1.75 ERA, 9-1 record. Here's the question I'll pose to you, Barnard. Do I wear the Ranger jersey to the game, or do I wear the June Schwarber jersey to the game?
It's Ranger Day every day for me. I still would rock with Ranger there.
We'll see. I haven't made my decision yet. So we'll see what I do. But let's get back to the basketball. Let's get back to the hoops. We're talking about a guy that I have never been a defender of. I've never been a huge fan of. I've never thought he was a top 25, 30 player. And it's Brandon Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's because he's been the first or second best guy on a team for most of his career. And I think that's driven down what my opinion is of him, because I don't think he is that.
Yeah.
What I think he could be is the perfect third star. And I think there's obviously the inclination to want the best, like Paul George or LeBron or the best possible player. There is an argument to be made if they can get any sort of maybe 3 picks instead of having to unload the whole thing and an asset of a player, like all this stuff. If you can trade Ingram if you can trade 3 picks for Ingram and take Ingram into the cap space, almost like it's a signing, and commit to signing him next year, I think he's a little overqualified for this, but there's some similarities to Denver adding a guy like Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon, who had his run in Orlando and had some success, but looked like a flawed player and maybe was being used in a role that was too prominent for his skills offensively or whatever you want to say. And he was able to slot into such a perfect role there in Denver, where they go and win the title, and they were very good this year as well. Then you have the Andrew Wiggins Golden State thing, where they took a chance on him when his value was at his lowest and people were done with Andrew Wiggins. And by the way, we're back there now, but he had a heck of a 2020 or 2021, 2022. I don't even remember all those years run together for me. Basketball, Lakers 2020, Bucks 2021. So he was 2022. And he had a heck of a finals, was absolutely the second best player on that team. There's been some revisionist history about Clay and about other guys on that team. Wiggins was the second best player on that team. By the way, if you bring up Klay Thompson to me on Twitter, you're muted. I'm good. No interest whatsoever. Wouldn't give him $15 million, let alone 30.
You also are anti bring back Buddy Hield, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely, yes. He's got like a $17 million cap hold too. So there's no signing him over the cap. So he's counting towards that $65 million. There's no way I want any of my limited assets going towards Buddy Hield. Like if it's Paul George, that means you're signing of 16 million potential dollars. You're giving how much of that to Buddy Hield?
10? Would you give him 10 mil?
Huh?
8 mil, 10 mil? Would you do that?
No, I wouldn't give him anything but the minimum.
Wow.
There's just no way that there's not better players available than Buddy Hield on our team. There's better players available.
Not that can shoot like that.
I guess shoot.
He's still like, I think again, like he wasn't perfect. It was more or less a failed experiment here in Philadelphia. But you still saw like that game 6, like that's why he's there. That level of shooting, that level of changing a game, he still possesses it. I would like to see Buddy Hield here for a longer period of time.
Yeah, if it's for a minimum, I'm in. But there's no way that he's worth using them in. Like, I'd much rather Oubre or Batum back.
Really? Wow. Okay.
You wouldn't? You'd rather Buddy than Oubre or Batum?
Batum for sure, yes. I'm with you on Batum. I don't know what they do with Batum, to be perfectly honest, because he's certainly worth more than a minimum guy. I mean, best case scenario is he takes one. I don't know if I see that. I mean, he started and played like 35 minutes in playoff games. Like that's worth more than a minimum right there.
Yeah.
But I also don't feel great about paying him at this age, and he might just straight up retire and not give them a decision either.
Well, I'm just saying in a vacuum, if you're able to sign all of them, Buddy is like, I don't even think he's like an option if you can sign the other two.
I might put, and this depends on this third star, which brings so much into it, but I might put Buddy above Oubre.
I'm not even an Oubre guy, but there's no way for me that it could be Buddy above Oubre. And I honestly, I'd rather like none of them back, unless you can get Batum back young. I would just rather use these limited assets we have on, like, I'll build out like a little of an offseason if you want with the Brandon Ingram thing. Brandon Ingram makes $36 million. So the 15% trade kicker that people bringing up would add $4 million to that. The thing that's a little hazy about that is I'm reading, if you search on anything, it tells you the team trading the player is the team that pays the trade kicker.
Interesting.
So what I don't know is, and this is actually, I should ask Marty Teller or Brian Toporek. They're pretty good cap guys. But what I don't know or understand is that, does that mean that he makes $40 million on the books and they pay the $4 million towards it? Or does it mean that $4 million is just like a bonus that isn't counted on the salary? That's what I don't know. But so let's say it's 36 mil instead of 40. That's $13 million more that you're able to do than you are with Paul George or LeBron, for that matter, or Jimmy, or whoever you want to say it's a max guy like that. It's $13 million less dollars for Ingram if he makes that 36 million, which is why he's so appealing. So my ideal offseason is you trade, like, I would honestly trade all the picks, all 5, for Ingram and Caruso. Like, if you could make that like some sort of 3-team deal, go get Ingram and Caruso. That takes up $46 million. So that leaves you $19 million. If you can give Oubre like
8,
I was going to say 10.
Okay.
So then that's so that's 46, 56, gives you like $9 million left to play around with. Let's slot Batum in for that. It seems like Joel loves Batum also. And by the way, I will just say this out. There's a 0% chance. In just actuality, besides what we want, I think there's a 0% chance Buddy Hield's a Sixer at like 0.0000. With how Daryl talked about the trade, I think there's no chance he would do that with a guy he was going to sign. But so $9 million left. I'll slot Batum in. So that means you have Maxey, Caruso, Ingram, Oubre, and Embiid with Batum off the bench. The 16th. I don't like that. You don't like that?
We got 0 shooters.
How is that true? Caruso's a shooter and Ingram's somewhat of a shooter. I mean, he only shot 4 a game last year. He shot 6 a game a few years ago. So that's where the 16th pick needs to be like Jared McCain, or it needs to be like I'm missing a draft name that's a shooter. Maybe Tristan Da Silva, but it needs to be a guy like that. And then maybe you take Batum out of that $9 million, and maybe you go and get a guard that can do a little bit more, that can shoot a little bit more. I don't know who that is, but it's not Buddy Hield.
I think like I've very much always been of the opinion of you need to have shooters around Joel Embiid, that like spacing's the name of the game, that I very much one of these like baseball card level shooters. Like Paul George is perfect and one of the driving forces why he's for sure number one. Like we're talking about 7.9 3-point attempts per game. Ingram, for what it's worth, like the exact same as Tobias Harris from an attempts standpoint from 3. And
that's
both guys,
career low though. It's the last 2 years have been career lows with Zion. So he was like a 6 guy for 3 straight years at one point.
Yeah, I mean, so he went 2.4, 1.8, 1.8, 6.2, 6.1, 4.1, 3.6, 3.8 has been the 3-point attempt trajectory for Ingram. Like, again, for both, like regardless of statistics, I've seen both Ingram and Tobias do far too much of the pump fake a 3 and then take a contested.
Real quick, I want to stop this now with Tobias and Ingram. I'm done with this the Tobias Ingram comparison everywhere. Brandon Ingram averages 5.5 assists a game for 3 straight years now. Like they're just, I get the lack of 3-point shooting. It's frustrating. I agree with that. But Tobias Harris is not averaging 5.5 assists. Like he's not a guy who creates for others like that.
Ingram's absolutely better than Tobias. I'm not arguing that for sure. I definitely want a baseball card level shooter. Like I'm even not fully closed the door on Klay Thompson. I think he's going to command way too much money, and he definitely looks a little bit cooked to me for sure. But a guy that will, like even last year, which was a down year from him, shot 9 3-point attempts per game and shot 39% on those.
Could I interest you in Gary Trent?
Yes, absolutely. Can interest me in Gary Trent.
I'm very interested in Gary Trent. Could I interest you? Maybe you don't do or maybe I'm trying to think. So if you do Ingram and Caruso, could you still sign? It depends what Monk gets.
Yeah.
I don't know what Monk's going to get. That's an interesting, what his market's going to be is really interesting because he's such a fun player. I love Malik Monk.
I do as well. I think Orlando is going to throw the bag at him.
You think so? Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah, I get that.
Caruso, for what it's worth, shot a career high 4.7 3-point attempts this year, knocked down him at a 40.8% rate. For his career, that's very good. Yeah. For his career, he's attempted 2.6 per game and shot 38% on those. So I like that he's taking strides in the right direction, and I'm absolutely in on bringing Caruso to this team, but not a guy that I was labeled as like a shooter.
I wonder what the per 36 on that is, or if he's kind of always shot the same amount, because he's definitely playing more now.
For Caruso?
Than he was previously. I wonder what the 3-point attempts there would be per 36.
Still a leap this year. That it was 5.9 3-point attempts per 36. Previously, his career high was 4.1 on that.
Okay, so yeah, that's a leap. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, Caruso's a guy I have a ton of interest in. I actually had a big argument. I have a friend who thinks like the Alex Caruso hype is like totally fake, and he thinks it's like such a nonsense thing. He thinks he's become like the most overrated player in sports. And I get what he's saying a little bit. Like there's definitely some times where I hear like Bill Simmons and Russillo talk about it being the best value contract in the NBA. And it is a good value contract like that. Yeah. It is definitely. But
I was there for a point in time, more so when he was on the Lakers. I think now it like his skill set is at such a premium. There's just so few players like that Alex Caruso does these type things that like the value's there for a reason, and every team could use a player like him. And there's just not that many of them available.
But if Caruso makes $25 million, the value goes away, and he will now. Like
you're right.
Once his deal's done, he's going to make a lot of money, and I get that. Once that, but like I said, cap doesn't matter to me. So you bring him in, you pay him over the cap after the fact. Who cares? It's all Josh Harris's Washington Commanders money anyway. But So maybe you don't do the Caruso trade in this scenario if you're worried about shooting, but he helps that anyway. But if you throw a bag at Monk because you trade for Ingram, you have 36, you have 29 million in cap. Maybe that could get you Monk if you wanted to just go all in on that. Then you give a mid-level to Oubre or Batum, and then you make the 16th pick at that. So that I like the initial thing I picked, even if there's less of a volume 3-point shooter more. But that would be Maxey, Monk, Ingram, Batum or Oubre, Joel, the 16th pick, and then a bunch of minimum guys. Whereas I think having Maxey, Caruso, Ingram, Oubre, Joel, and the other of Oubre or Batum, whoever you want to say, and then the 16th pick, like you get one more guy, and then you can add shooting with either with the 16th pick. You add shooting with the minimum guys that you chase, with the mid-level guy that you chase, whatever the case may be. So that's my ideal offseason. I know that maybe it doesn't bring the spacing. I once upon a time was like, you have to shoot 1 million threes around Joel, and I still believe that. I think Maxey is going to be enough of a volume 3-point shooter that it takes care of a lot of it. I do think, and I think the 16th pick has to be a guy who shoots a lot. I think Caruso is what we saw last year in terms of his shooting. And I think Brandon Ingram maybe we can get him back to that 6 a game that he did for 2 years there. If he can be that, he's the perfect third star, I think. If he can be that 6. So here's what I'll say. Here's my hot take. And I know you'll be upset. I think I've talked you a little bit more in, though, on some of the Ingram stuff. But my hottest take about Ingram is if you can get him to be a 6 3-point attempt per game guy, I think I'd rather trade for him than do anything else. The concern is that he's a 4 3-point attempt per game guy.
Right.
Besides LeBron. LeBron's another conversation. But I might rather do the Brandon Ingram trade than sign Paul George. Now, you don't have assurances that he can be that and still be efficient from 3, shooting 6 a game like he was a couple of years ago. If you had that assurance, that would be my number one preferred thing. But since it's not, it's a 1B to Paul George's 1A. And the reason is that 13 million, or even if it's even with the kicker, if it's a $9 million gap, that's a big difference between what you're able to do this offseason. So that's why I'm so interested in Brandon Ingram. It's because he makes a little bit less than that other tier of guys we're talking about. And it's the same thing with Alex Caruso. I wouldn't be interested in Alex Caruso if he made 20 or 25 million. One more guy I'll bring up: trade every pick for Larry Markkinen.
Absolutely.
Trade 5 firsts and 16
pick
for
swaps.
Larry Markkinen. Everything. Yeah, I agree. Pick swaps. Give the Gobert trade up for Larry Markkinen if that's possible. And I think they would probably consider it if you completely, blow their socks off. I would do it in a heartbeat because he makes what does he make this year? Like 18 million.
I believe so.
Crazy. You could do that and go and sign not Paul George, but you could do that and go and sign definitely like Monk or anyone you want that's like not a supermax guy.
Yeah, I'm 1,000% with you on that. Like Lauri Markkanen's a real deal all-star. He's 26 years old. He's like that true like floor spacing 4 who can play some center in the non-Joel lineups. And like the 3-point volume we're talking about for him, shot 8 this year and connected at a 39.9% rate. He shot over 40% in the season before, was 39.1% on 7.7 attempts last year. He can create a little off the dribble. I'm absolutely with you that if the Jazz will remotely consider that, ship everything and bring in Lauri Markkinen. I just don't see that happening, unfortunately. All these guys, I think the frustrating part from the Sixers standpoint is they've done all this work to create this cap space, this flexibility, but it feels like all these options are not entirely in their control, and that's like a tough spot to be in.
And Mikhail is the same boat. And we had a conversation, and this is something to follow for the future, but I think Mikhail is overrated at this point for sure. And I like Mikhail a lot, but I do think some of the conversations that get thrown in, he's a guy who averaged like 19 last year. He doesn't create for others. He can't really create for himself. He's a 3-and-D guy, which he's really good at both of those things for sure. But the reason Mikhail's so interesting, he's maybe the best contract in basketball. So you go and you get him for 23 million, 24 million, whatever he makes this year. Then you have legitimately like 38 million in cap to mess around with. You could do a ton if you go and get Mikhail, give up all the picks for him as well. What I will say is, in a vacuum, I'd rather have Brandon Ingram on the team. And this is a question that I'll ask you in general, because I know you're focused on the spacing argument. And I get it. I've been there. I think I'm at the point where I'm willing to trade some volume 3-point shooting and spacing for a guy who can create for others at a high level, like Brandon Ingram. That's where I'm at. Or whoever you want to throw at me, if they're like DeJounte, I guess you could say too, if that's a name you wanted to throw out there. It's a little less interesting to me. He also doesn't make that much though. He's in, I think, the high 20s. So he's another he's a really interesting option to me, actually. I'm much more interested in that than anything with I forget who we were talking about. Levine, yes. Yeah. I'm way more interested in the DeJounte thing. But how is it interesting to you at all to maybe trade off some of that volume 3-point shooting for a guy who gets Maxey off the ball? And I think so many times we felt like we have like one guy who can dribble on the court and we don't have anyone who can get an entry pass to Joel, and we have these issues. I think getting a guy like Ingram would solve a lot of that, even if he isn't the volume 3-point shooter we want.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from. And my spacing arguments here, I'm not where you're at with all this. The spacing arguments to me is way more about like having guys that scare teams from doubling down on Joel, that having a Klay Thompson or a Seth Curry or a JJ Redick or whoever that player is to like double off. You got to find an opportunity to either give Joel his one-on-one opportunity or guys that will punish him when teams double is more so where I'm coming from. And like in general, they just haven't shot enough threes. There was one season where they were really committed to it. It was under Doc Rivers, actually, that we saw these numbers go crazy from beyond the 3-point arc. Like last year, I think they ranked 17th in 3-point attempts in the league. That to me is not good enough when you got a team, but like everyone except for Joel should be launching threes, I feel.
Well, it's a shame we didn't keep a guy called James Harden around then. But I mean, by the way, when you said like the year under Doc Rivers, it was the year under James Harden. It was really
James Harden also didn't take catch and shoot threes whatsoever, which was mad.
I know. Yeah, which is frustrating for sure. But he definitely provides the spacing. But my argument back to that is you're not leaving Brandon Ingram on the 3-point line to double Joel. And I know he's not a volume 3-point shooter. He's not a guy you double off of. Like even Caruso, like I think Caruso's a good enough shooter to keep you honest there. Batum definitely is. Oubre's Oubre's the most confident 28% 3-point shooter in the history of basketball. 100%. So I don't even know how to like quantify the Oubre conversation. But yeah, I don't think these are. I would agree with you if I was talking about like a guy who just didn't shoot. Like we're talking about Josh Giddey, yeah. But I don't think these guys are guys you can just leave. Like Brandon Ingram, if you leave him, he will punish you. And maybe it's not a 3 every time, but if you leave him and give him that much room to create, and he'll go in and things will collapse and then he kicks out to someone else. Like I just think Brandon Ingram's not a guy who you can double off of.
No, he's not, but he's also not a guy that like has that quick look at a catch and 3 and is going to take it. That like Ingram, if you just gave him take your ideal shot selection, the shot diet's going to look pretty similar to Joel's. And I don't like guys operating in the same space as him. That like Ingram's preferred shot to me feels from every time that I watched him is getting to that elbow range, kind of backing in and taking that fadeaway. And I
really
hate that. He is very good at it, but I hate that as a shot. Like that's the least efficient shot in the entire world of basketball. And we see that more and more with kind of, I get like you still have to be able to take it. I just need high volume 3-point shooters surrounding Joel Embiid. I'm skeptical that Ingram becomes that. I think he's more so what he's showing. And some of it is because of Trey Murphy and CJ McCollum launching from around him for sure. That's definitely a part of the equation. But I'm just skeptical that he takes that leap again to be a high volume guy.
I think he's also had a terrible like coaching situation for most of his career. But I think he probably is like a 5 3-point game guy instead of being 4 where he is now or 6 where he was. And I just don't think you're giving enough credit to how important it would be to get a wing who averages 6 assists a game or 5.5 assists a game. Like I really do think that does an absolute ton for the flow of the offense, the P&R options. I think of Brandon Ingram, Joel P&R with Maxey standing off to the side. I think that gives you plenty of spacing, like on all 3 parts of it. I think that's a really, really interesting kind of thing to mess around with. But yeah, the Ingram, I'm so sold, man. It's bad how much I've sold myself. He gets to the rim a little bit more than I think people think too.
Yeah, he's a good player for sure.
Yeah,
he's absolutely a good player.
He averaged Jimmy Butler stats last year. He had 21, 5 and 5, shooting 49% from the field. And I get he didn't shoot a ton of threes. He shot like twice as many as Jimmy with the same stats. So he didn't get to the line quite as much, obviously, but I don't think you're asking him to get to the line that much here. Honestly, you're asking him to create for Maxey, create for Joel. You're asking him to get his 18 a game, 19 a game, and hopefully shoot a little bit more threes. But let's table this. We'll have a lot more time to talk Sixers offseason stuff. I had another name I wanted to bring up. I've lost it. Can't find it in my head. We'll have to wait till next week to find out what it was. But Sean Barnard, thanks to Sean back in studio. You can follow him on Twitter at Sean_Bernard1. You follow me on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. Follow the Gambler at FoxPHL Gambler. Go subscribe over on YouTube. Do we have Green Legion Radio coming up at 1 o'clock?
We do. We do have Green Legion Radio next.
Shout out to Quimby. Always shout out to Quimby. The guy got me to meet Ric Flair. Got me sitting next to Ric Flair. So I'll always shout out Quimby. Always shout out Green Legion. Everyone stay tuned to the Gambler for 1 o'clock. Green Legion Radio. But for now, Tough Cover Radio Show, Tough Cover Country. Let's ride.
Hey, if you're listening to me right now, I have one thing every